ago at this stage, I think. It's a long time ago, and Simon has obviously gone on to bigger and better things ever since. Moving on from our politicians, I think I want to say a really special welcome to the people who are here tonight who have autism or who love someone with autism, who have someone with autism in their family. You're particularly welcome, and this is an autism-friendly event, so we have earplugs if anybody needs them. We also have a quiet room down at the very back where people can go in if they just need to take the breather. It's very much an interactive exhibition, and we really hope that you'll get the chance to go around, take a look at the exhibits, try the activities. One of the ones that I tried earlier today was the one connected with smell. My son is down there at the moment, Alton. He won't like me mentioning him. But what you do at that station is you put a blindfold on, and you also put on earmuffs. And then you have different scented things placed underneath your nose. And afterwards you take them off and you're asked, how did you feel about that? And I have to say, when I was doing it, I felt anxious. I felt I was just beginning to get some of the smells to be able to identify them, and then the next one was there. You also feel very vulnerable because you don't know what's going to come next. Things were moving a bit too fast for me. I wanted to take the blindfold off or the earplugs. I found it difficult to cope with the two. And those feelings that I have are the types of feelings that people with autism might experience on a day-to-day basis when they're going around our community trying to navigate certain situations. Greystones is a wonderful place to live, and I think we're very honoured to be the first people to host this exhibition. It's going to travel the country, and we really hope that you guys are going to be ambassadors for us tonight. So thank you so much for coming, because it's lovely that you made the effort to give up the time this evening to be here. But we're going to ask you to do a little bit more than that. We're going to ask you to tell someone else about this exhibition, preferably more than one person. If they can't make it here themselves tomorrow between 10 and 6, or Wednesday between 10 and 9, then maybe just share with them something that you learned from going around here this evening. Now, we have three very special guests, and we're going to hear from them a little later on. They're members of the Youth Hub. We have Grania, we have Lara, and we have Ben. And Lara and Ben were both members of the AAA, and I know about 2 years ago when Adam came to my school, St. Conan's in Bray, Ben was in the audience. Ben heard Adam speaking, and I think for Ben it was probably a moment that turned things around a little bit for him. And that for me was the first time I heard Adam speak. And his communication style was amazing. He's very articulate, and he's a wonderful ambassador for people with autism. I think the community of people with autism is very lucky to have him, to represent them and to be able to share, their experiences with us. And so I'm going to pass you on next to Adam, and he'll talk for a few minutes, and he'll then introduce the members of our Youth Hub team to you. So thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for taking the time to come along and visit the exhibition here this evening. I suppose, why are we here and what is this all really about? I think when we're talking about autism, over the last number of years, it's a word that we hear more and more. So if you think about it, whether it's we know a family, whether we have a family member or we are someone with autism, or whether it's we know somebody, so it's a friend of a friend, or it's a distant relative, or maybe we just watched The Big Bang Theory and we know who Sheldon is, or maybe some people are willing to admit they watch Coronation Street and they know who Roy Cropper is. But we all have maybe our own ideas, or we've heard the word autism, or maybe even our understanding is simply that we know the colour of blue is associated with autism, or that we've donated €2 to the cause at some stage or another. And that's obviously really welcome, because awareness and a knowledge of the word is obviously a really important starting point. But really what the next thing that needs to happen when we talk about autism in Ireland is we need to move from awareness to understanding. Because the analogy that I always use is, I'm aware that Mandarin is a language, but I don't actually speak that language. Therefore, I have difficulty understanding people who only speak that language. And the reality is that people with autism think in a different way, communicate in a different way, and face day-to-day challenges within every community that often people aren't even aware of. Because, of course, autism is an invisible condition. It's also not a rare condition. It's a condition that affects around 1 in 100 people in our community. So if you just think about that for a moment, if you think about everyone you went or go to school with, if you think of everybody in your workplace, your family, your extended family, your community, we all know far more than 100 people. So on a day-to-day basis, we all meet and interact with people with autism. But whereas when we meet people with other disabilities, perhaps we have an idea of what that actually means and what we should do. Often we don't actually know what it actually means to have autism and what the challenges actually are. And as a result, people with autism face challenges that aren't actually to do with having the diagnosis of autism, but rather they're to do with how society responds to those with the condition. So some statistics that aren't pleasant, but sometimes need to be put on the record, is the percentage of people with autism in our school system, around 50%, who experience bullying at one stage or another. The fact that we now are seeing more and more people grow up in our community who are reaching adulthood, who are now experiencing unemployment just because of how an interview works, not because they're not able to do the job. And we have a huge amount of people who experience isolation or discrimination for whatever reason, simply because people just don't have that knowledge. So we had an ambition in ASIAM to try and actually enable people to have a deeper understanding of the condition. But we know that to try and sit everyone down and get into the very complex science of autism isn't always the most exciting way to spend people's spare time. So what we've tried to do is make it a little bit more engaging. And of course, the best way to learn about what it's like to have a condition is to walk a mile in somebody's shoes. So the whole concept of this exhibition is that people are able to come in a very accessible question and answer style, learn about the condition. Because sometimes when it comes to things like disabilities, the reason why there's ignorance or the reason why there's confusion is because we're too polite to ask the questions. I spend a lot of time in schools, and some of my favourite places to go are when you're talking to really small kids, because they've no interest in being polite, so they'll ask you exactly what they're thinking. But I sometimes think if people were more willing to ask questions, we'd actually have a much more informed discussion when it comes to autism. And then, of course, as well, the opportunity to actually have a hands-on experience of some of the challenges that people with autism face. Because I always maintain I don't think people with autism are excluded because they have autism. Rather, it's because there isn't an understanding of what that person is actually going through or the challenges that they're facing. We particularly have wanted to have a focus, I suppose, in recent years in ASIAM around young people, because, as I mentioned, more and more young people diagnosed as children with autism in Ireland are now reaching adulthood, and we need to change our discussion. And it can't just be restricted to medical professionals. It has to go right out into all strata of our community. But also we know from a whole range of social issues in Ireland that the generation that can lead that change are young people. And it's particularly important that young people are aware of this, because transition and moving from one stage of education to another, or moving from education into employment or into the adult world, can be so much more challenging for people with autism. So it's so important that the peer group have some degree of awareness and understanding of that. That's what led us to create this exhibition with the support of the Department of Justice and Equality. We decided to start it on good, solid home ground to make sure we got a good crowd. So we've had over 40 in already today before we welcomed you guys, and we hope that you'll spread the word over the next few days and get more people here before it begins to travel right around the country. The other thing that we've tried to do with, I suppose, our youth work is there's a kind of adage within the disability community, nothing about us without us. And the idea that the best experts when it comes to autism are people with autism and their family members. And to that end, we've developed a youth leadership team, so 15 incredible young people aged 16 to 22 from around the country who come together in our offices in Dublin every 2 to 3 weeks, and they've directed putting this campaign together and the key messages that they want to get out. So I'm going to pass you over to them now in a moment, but the one thing that I want to say is it's really important. Sometimes at these events it can be lovely to come along and hear about it, and it's all very exciting. The critical thing is there's no point leaving it in the room. It's a wasted exercise if it stays in the room. Equally, it's a wasted exercise if you're waiting to employ some of the stuff you learn for someone to come up and say, by the way, I have autism, because very few people with autism wear t-shirts saying they have the condition. So what's quite important is that only a few. So what's quite important is that we bring the conversation beyond here. So everyone in this room tonight can help us do this, and they can have a chance to win a €100 One for All voucher as well. So all you have to do is take a selfie somewhere in the exhibition tonight, post it to social media, and bear in mind that we all have a role to play in autism inclusion. So post it with the hashtag I'm part of the answer. And on Wednesday evening or Thursday morning, we will randomly select a winner for the voucher. So someone within our community will be a lucky winner. So on that note, I think it'd be really important that we supplement what we're hearing tonight from some of the actual voices of our youth leadership team. So we're going to hear from Ben, from Lara, and from Brian. And I just want to hand you over to begin with Ben, who's going to speak to us for a couple of moments.